with the Money Spot presenting the psychology of money. My name is Carolyn McCrae. I'm the Director of Financial Wellness here at VCU. And I would like to introduce our two presenters, Dorian and Ryan, who will be leading us through today's presentation. Both are coaches with the Money Spot, and we're just so happy to have them here to talk us through today's presentation. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Dorian and Ryan to take it away.
Hi, everyone. As Carolyn said, we're really excited to be with you guys today. I can't remember if she mentioned this already, but I am recording the session so that then at the end or a few days from now, we'll be able to send you copies of the recording in case you need to reference it. So we're doing psychology of money today, talking about how values affect your financial habits. And I'll go ahead, Ryan, sorry.
Yeah, this is just going to introduce the agenda real fast of some of the things we're going to go over. A couple of different topics, like we have starting with behavioral finance, going over five ways that people are dumb with money. We can go over some of the biases that people fall into when they're being dumb with money. We're going to talk about a value sort and then the money habitudes.
Okay, so to start, we'll go with behavioral finance. So I'm going to launch 2 poll questions for you guys that we would love to have you answer. So I'll go ahead and do that. But basically, we want you to tell us, have you ever spent money because you were happy, sad, stressed, or angry? And then have you ever made a purchase that you later regretted? And if you feel comfortable either sharing in the chat or raising your hand and coming off mute, we'd love to hear about some of your experiences and maybe get a nice dialogue going to learn about some of our different financial behaviors. Give people maybe a little bit of more time. Okay. I'll go ahead and end the poll. So if I share the results, we can see that most people have spent money when they were feeling a particular emotion. And I see one maybe, so one person thinks maybe they have, but they're not quite sure. I know from my experiences, I definitely spend money when I'm happy, sad, stressed, or angry. This is like a regular occurrence for me. Target is my emotional shopping store, I feel like. When I'm super excited about something, I want to go spend a bunch of money at Target. If I'm sad about something, I also want to go spend a lot of money at Target. So covers all of my needs there. And then have you ever made a purchase that you later regret? 80% of you say yes. And I think that speaks volumes about what we're thinking about when we're making those purchases and kind of how we're feeling after we make them. Again, I don't know what Ryan will have to say, but I know that I've made tons of purchases that I've regretted. We were talking about this in a work meeting a couple of weeks ago, and I shared about how I bought some mouthwash that I later regretted. Kind of a crazy story, but I just regretted the purchase because I didn't buy something I was already familiar with. I tried to go rogue and buy a different product, and it did not end well for me, but I did get my money back, which was super important. But yeah, I definitely think that throughout this presentation, we'll maybe learn about some ways to reframe our thinking when it comes to emotional purchases, or maybe how to limit purchases that we'll later regret. As we learned about like biases and ways that we're done with money. But is there anybody in the chat or who wants to come off mute, who wants to share their experience?
We do have a note in the chat that one of our participants says that they thrift shop when stressed.
Okay, that's really cool. I mean, I think that's super interesting that you can identify that when you are specifically feeling the stressed emotion, you're like, I want to go to the thrift store. That's super interesting. I don't know if I could do that. Maybe thrift shopping would make me more stressed because there's so many things you have to sort through. That's super interesting. Anybody else have anything to share?
Yeah, the same. I kind of, if I'm upset or things didn't go quite the way I wanted them to, it's like I call it comfort shopping or stress shopping. So I'll go buy something and so then it'll make me feel better. As far as a purchase, something I regret, I can relate to what you said, Dorian. I tried this new deodorant. I was like, oh, it's all natural, etc. And I should have read the reviews before I bought it, but I didn't read the reviews till afterwards. And it was like, yeah, if you work out a lot, it doesn't work. I was like, well, this isn't going to work. And then when I did use it, when I was just at home in a rest state, it irritated my underarms, it started burning. And I'm like, this is natural. Why is it doing this? So, yeah. And then I would say my last purchase that I regret, I did splurge and buy a Louis Vuitton purse, which is a lot of money, put on my credit card and paid it over time. But hindsight is 2020. I probably could have waited longer. It wasn't a need. It was just a desire. So, but it was impulsive. It was my birthday. I was upset I couldn't travel, with everything happening with the pandemic. So, yeah, I regret. I mean, I love the purse, don't get me wrong, but just wrong timing, I feel like.
No, thank you for sharing. I really appreciate that. And I think that you really hit on some really great points that we're going to dive a little bit deeper into as we move through the presentation, especially the hindsight is 2020 thing. That's a huge thing for people, right? It's at the time you see it as something that you really, really want and you're like, I'm ready to buy it. But then once you have it, you're like, well, maybe I didn't need this right now. Maybe I could have waited, saved up a little bit more money, and it would have been just fine for me then too. And also what you were saying about the deodorant, that's all about marketing, right? The people got you with the marketing and you were just like, yep, I'm gonna get this product and it's gonna be really great. But, sometimes we have those regrets and that's okay too. It's a natural part of being a consumer. So we'll move on. So now I'm going to give you guys some definitions of behavioral finance, and we'll kind of talk a little bit more about what behavioral finance is. So behavioral finance or behavioral economics really focuses on how human decision-making really is affected by psychology and your behaviors. They all work together to influence how you do things with your money. Sometimes we see the decisions that investors might make or people who work in the business world. And as we observe them, we're like, hey, that kind of seems irrational. It seems kind of random. I have no idea why they're making those decisions that they are making. But behavioral finance can help us study a little bit more closely about why those specific professionals made the decisions that they made, or maybe even why we as consumers on an everyday basis make some of the decisions that we make. So behavioral finance and behavioral economics differ drastically from the traditional economic study. We didn't talk about this previously, but I am an economics major, so I can attest to this statement. But in traditional econ, we like to assume that humans are rational decision makers. Every economic theory is based on the concept that people behave rationally. But I think that we all know that we do not behave rationally. The poll that we just saw before, where we were talking about, have you ever made a purchase when you were feeling a particular emotion? That's showing that we're not rational decision makers, and that sometimes things come up. Our emotions and our biases have a really, really strong impact on the decisions that we make to save or spend or invest. Like I've mentioned, for me, it's a really big thing. And I've had to really understand that I am not a rational decision maker and learn how to deal with that and be okay with that as a concept. The next thing is we are loss adverse. We as people don't like to lose money. We don't like to lose money way more than we like to get money, right? And some studies even suggest that there's the pain associated with losing money is twice as powerful as the joy of winning. I don't know if you guys can attest to that, but that's kind of how I feel about the lottery. Like the thought of me losing money playing the lottery pains me way more than the thought of ever winning the lottery. If I don't ever win the lottery, I'm okay, right? Like I don't have that money now, so I'm not thinking about it. But the money that I lose every time I play, that might not be for me. I'm loss averse. I'm also pretty risk averse too. So that's why I'm not that into the lottery. But everyone is a little bit different. And then lastly, social pressure plays a huge part into behavioral finance. We want to be like other people. We want to imitate them. We all want to stay on trend and in the know, whether that's fashion trends, whether that's the latest financial habit like cryptocurrency. There's something in every one of us that desires to be like other people around us. Sometimes I think that social pressure is the media, things like ads you see on social media or influencers you might see like on Instagram, things like that. Those might be the people who are influencing you and creating that social pressure, but it exists. If you see somebody with a particular product and they're advertising it, you want to buy it because you're like, well, this person has it and they must really, really love it. And the same thing goes with selling. If somebody else is selling off a product saying that they don't like it or they're tired of using it, you feel the same way. And those social norms and peer pressure do play a big part in our decisions. And a lot of times we even assume that other people know more than we do, right? We're taking their feedback, their reviews at face value, and we're not always thinking, hey, we might actually know something about this topic and we might actually have a particular feeling about it. We're not trusting of ourselves in that way. So that's just some basic information about behavioral finance. Keep those kind of ideas in the back of your head. Does anybody have any thoughts, questions, comments on that? Anybody see these things play out in their everyday life? Yeah. I know for me with the social pressure, a big thing is like cryptocurrency and NFTs. I literally see people every day, all day posting about NFTs, and it makes me wonder about them. But I know that I have to do my own research to decide if that's something that I'm actually interested or not. But that's just me. Okay. If nobody has any questions, I guess we can move on.
So next we're going to take a look at this video brought to us by 2 Cents, which is like a little educational show about personal finance, brought to you by PBS, I believe.
Imagine a person who always makes the right financial decisions. Let's call her Penny. Penny approaches every money problem with perfect logic and reason. She never gets emotional or impulsive and always knows what's in her own best interests. You're probably thinking that Penny sounds imaginary and kind of obnoxious. But for over 100 years, most economists believe that the world was made up entirely of pennies. That you and I and everyone you know always made the best decisions to maximize our happiness.
As crazy as that sounds, that was the conventional wisdom until a small group of economists and psychologists started to question whether penny actually existed at all. One of them, Richard Thaler, won the Nobel Prize last year for showing that not only do humans make financial mistakes, they make predictable mistakes. He joked about calling his research dumb stuff people do. But today, it's called behavioral economics, and it has changed public policy across the world.
Thaler showed that humans can't quite remove their emotions from the decision-making process, but being able to predict these money mistakes might help you avoid them.
Let's say you're helping your mom clean out the garage and you find a pack of Pokemon cards that you must have bought when you were a kid and forgot to open. So you go through them and holy cow, there's a first edition Charizard in mint condition. Even though you could easily get $3,000 on eBay for it, you decide to buy a frame and keep it on a shelf in your apartment.
Okay, let's rewind and consider a different scenario. Instead of helping your mom clean out the garage, you decide to go to the comic book store. And there, in a glass case, you see a first edition Charizard card priced at $3,000. Even though you used to love Pokemon, you would never dream of shelling out that kind of dough for a playing card, and you leave the store.
This may seem like understandable behavior, but it's completely irrational. In the first scenario, you're deciding that a Charizard card is worth giving up $3,000 for. But in the second scenario, you're deciding a Charizard card is not worth giving up $3,000 for.
To a perfectly rational being like Penny, whether or not you already own the card should be irrelevant when judging its value. But clearly, to humans like you and me, it's very relevant.
Thaler called this the Endowment Effect. Our tendency to assign more value to the things we already own than the things we could own. Anytime you refuse to sell something for an amount that's more than you'd pay for it, you are experiencing the endowment effect. Ugh, this movie's awful.
I know.
Why don't we watch something else?
We can't.
Well, why not?
I paid $6 to rent this movie. We can't just throw that money away.
Oh, you bring the popcorn.
We have to finish it. That bag cost us 89 cents.
Have you ever watched a movie you hated all the way to the end? Or finished a meal you weren't enjoying just because you paid for it and you wanted to get your money's worth? If so, you have fallen victim to the sunk cost fallacy. It's not like sitting through the Emoji Movie will magically refund the rental price. That money is sunk, and it's not coming back. So why put yourself through the extra pain?
Most of us keep an emotional balance sheet in our head, which is less concerned with actual gains and losses than the feeling of gains and losses. Even though watching the movie makes you less happy, at least if you sit through it, you don't have to count that $6 as a loss in your mental checkbook.
Our fear of sunk costs is so great that businesses can use it to squeeze even more money out of us. Many retailers sell memberships that include perks like discounts and free shipping. They know that some people will buy extra stuff they don't really need just to make sure they get their money's worth.
Imagine that you're shopping for some headphones, and you're about to buy some for $15 when you find out that the store down the street is selling the exact same pair for $10. It's just a 10-minute walk. Would you do it? Now, same scenario, but this time you're shopping for a laptop. The first store has the model you want for $675, the second store $670. Now do you take the walk?
Many people will answer these two questions differently, even though they're essentially the same question. Is it worth $5 to take a 10-minute walk? All other context should be irrelevant. Yet people are more likely to say yes to the first scenario because it feels like you're getting a better deal.
This is called transaction utility, the amount of mental pleasure or pain we get from feeling like we paid less or more than something's really worth. And it's often totally disconnected from the happiness you get from the thing itself.
Stores have been exploiting transaction utility from time immemorial, like the notoriously inflated manufacturer's suggested retail price, which makes it look like every item is always on sale. And some shoppers are so addicted to transaction utility that they'll fill their houses with stuff they don't need and will never use just to chase that bargain high.
Of course, it's always important to shop around and find the best deal. But remember that when considering any purchase, the only thing that matters is what it's worth to you.
If you won $100 on a lottery scratcher, what would you do with the money? Buy an expensive pair of shoes, go out for a fancy dinner? Most people say they're more likely to spend unexpected income on something indulgent or frivolous because, hey, it's not like I worked for that money. It was free.
Thaler called this kind of thinking mental accounting, which means separating money into imaginary categories in your mind. Mental accounting violates the rule that money is fungible, that is totally interchangeable. Once you own $1, it's the same as any other and it shouldn't be treated differently just because of where it came from.
For Penny, that pair of shoes is either worth giving up $100 for or it's not. Just because some money unexpectedly showed up doesn't make the shoes worth more.
Mental accounting can be helpful in making monthly budgets and sticking to them, but even then it can lead us down irrational roads. One study focused on how consumers reacted to a drop in gas prices from $4 to $2 a gallon. This was at the beginning of the 2008 financial crisis, so you'd think that most families would have had a lot of use for that extra $40 a week.
Instead, researchers found that people were surprisingly likely to squander those savings on a higher grade of gas. It's as if in their minds they had budgeted a certain amount to gas, so it had to be spent on gas. They couldn't treat the money as fungible.
Mental accounting exists for the same reason a lot of fallacies do, because our brains aren't perfect supercomputers and we use a lot of mental shortcuts and emotional instincts just to get by.
But knowing what those shortcuts are will make you less likely to rely on them in the future. You may not ever be as wise as Penny, but being penny wise is pretty good too.
And that's our 2 cents.
If you want to hear
Yeah. So did anyone have any thoughts about that video? Anyone remember any of the economists that they talked about or any of the specific biases that people give into?
This is Gail. Yeah, I mean, I identified with most of those biases. I didn't see anything that was completely out of the realm of the way I've thought before.
Right. And I feel like it's nice to like actually learn this stuff and have like a title assigned to what you're feeling. It's not just some arbitrary thing that you're like, oh, like especially with the sunk cost value. I feel like that's something that I really resonate with, trying to get your money's worth out of something. And, you know, now that you know it's the sunk cost value, you're not just like, oh, I have to get my money's worth. Okay, I actually understand that that's something that people give into, and I don't have to fall for this this bias that people give into.
I think it's helpful to be able to put a label or identify what is going on with myself or anyone else emotionally, because money seems to just cloud our thinking because of a lot of things that we have learned from the past that we are not aware that we're making decisions on.
Right.
Ryan, we've got a couple comments in the chat about that folks are seeing these displayed in their day-to-day lives, and it's refreshing to have a title for the things that they're doing.
Exactly. And that's what I was saying earlier. It's nice to know that you're not alone in your thinking, and that it's a real thing that economists have figured out that people do.
Yeah, definitely. If I like get money for my birthday or unexpected money for something, you do think, okay, I need to spend this money on me. This money was given to me to do something for me. Even if there's like a bill, you know, you need to pay or something you need to do. So you just treat that money so differently from the money that you get in your paycheck.
Right. The mental categorization of all that.
One thing I've noticed, and I don't know which one of these it falls into, is with the whole online shopping thing. I'll go comparison shopping between websites, and even though I know it's the same exact thing for slightly different prices on different websites, sometimes I'm just more willing to pay a little bit more to purchase it off of a website that I feel more comfortable with.
Right. That is one of the biases that we're going to get into in the next slide. So here are a couple that we can go back over. Some of them they mentioned in the video, some of them they didn't. First, I'm going to start off with a hindsight bias. I'll just give a little definition for each of them, then we can talk about them. So the hindsight bias is the tendency to look back at an unpredictable event. I think that it was easily predictable. You think that you could have known it all along, even though, you know, there's no way you could have known that. A good example for that is stocks. Stocks that have blown up, like, you know, Apple is a good one. You're like, oh, you know, if back then I definitely would have invested in Apple, and then I would have been rich now with all the stocks that they have. But there's no way that you really would have known that Apple would have blown up. And same thing with a lot of the stocks. Sometimes it just happens. The next one is the endowment effect, which they did talk about in the video. The things that we own are worth more to us than we'd be willing to pay for them. So, you know, the example that they gave in the video was the rare Charizard Pokemon card. You know, you have this card and you think that it's worth, you know, now that you have it, you're like, okay, someone can buy it off of me for $3,000. But in the same mindset, are you going to be the one to buy that $3,000 Pokemon card off of someone else? The framing effect is the one that someone mentioned before, paying a little bit extra for the website that you trust. I feel like it falls into this category. The framing effect is how your decisions are influenced based on how information is presented to you. So I guess for a website that you trust, it's framed in a way that you're comfortable with. I feel like Amazon's very put together, rather than, if you go to some website with it looks like a sketchy link or something. It's framed in a different manner that you don't want to trust it as much. Even if it's a better deal, you're going to want to go to the place that you trust that looks better. Another example of the framing effect is like the lottery. They frame it like you can win $1 million, you can win tens of millions of dollars. They're like, hey, you should try to win this, but they don't tell you how minute that chance is. They frame it like you could win, like everyone's going to be a winner, but that's not the reality. Next, we have the sunk cost fallacy, which we've talked about a bunch. The idea that you have to get your money's worth out of something. Like I said, I feel like this is one that I fall into a lot. I'll buy something, or I'll have a meal, and I'm like, oh, this is all right, but like I feel obligated to finish it because I paid for it. Where finishing a meal or finishing the example they gave, finishing the movie is not gonna make what you spent any different. And the last one is the cashless effect, which I feel is particularly abundant in this year, this generation, where people are more willing to pay for things when there's no physical transaction. I feel like you'd have a very different response to handing out cash to pay for something, especially expensive things, rather than just swiping your card and forgetting about it. We're not thinking of money as a tangible thing. We're thinking of our card just being something that we can swipe infinitely, rather than once you take the money out of like an envelope, it's gone. You're not going to get that back. Does anyone have any questions about these? That makes sense?
I was just thinking about the hindsight bias, and another example that I think is really funny, I guess, that I was just thinking about is with like Blockbuster and Netflix. Like Blockbuster had the opportunity to purchase Netflix, and then was like, nah, like they don't do what I want to, like what we want to be doing. Like we're not interested. And I'm sure that there's a bunch of people who work at Blockbuster now who are kicking themselves like many a time over, like, oh, if only we would have known, like we should have known all along, like we could have been at the start. And now, Blockbuster's out of business and Netflix is clearly thriving because they're taking most people's money. And I just think that that's really an interesting thing to think about, like, oh, if I would have known.
Let's see a couple comments in chat here. So someone will donate a lot of things, even if you might be able to sell them, maybe mainly just because you don't want to deal with them. I can understand that. Going back to the Pokemon card example, I know I have a bunch of Pokemon cards in my room from when I was a kid, and I could go through all the effort to try and sell all of them. Some of them might be worth something, but it's a lot of effort to put through for whatever it might be worth. Other people,
I definitely try to get my money's worth out of everything that I buy. Me and my brother was talking about that earlier. Has Timberland boots that he gave me as a Christmas or birthday present, and I held on because Timberland boots hold up a long time. I held on to them things forever instead of throwing them out. Like he was like, I hope you still don't have those boots. I was like, no, I finally threw them out. But it's just like, even though I didn't even pay my money for them, I still wanted to get like my money's worth out of it. So you're, even with a pair of pants that's missing a button, you'll sew a button on so that you can keep them a little bit longer. So instead of just going ahead and buy another pair of pants, because you really determine, I spent this money, I want to get my money's worth. And definitely the Amazon thing applies to you. Like, I'm spending this money every month for Prime, so I need to be purchasing stuff. That's why I have this subscription. And so if only people thought that way about the gym. Some people pay for the gym and never go. I'm like, just throwing away money.
Right.
I think it's amazing how much we want to think that we're logical, but we invest a lot of emotion. I'm learning by watching this in money and our decisions about money. I was also thinking of when I was growing up, if my parents would say, well, if you didn't eat all of the food on your plate, you'd be wasting your food. So we take that into adulthood. So when we go to a restaurant, we don't like any of the food, we'll eat it anyway, a lot of times. And it's the same thing. You know, you're just in your mind, you're thinking that you'll waste your money if you don't eat this food that you don't like. So it's amazing. I wasn't really thinking about how much emotion I put in my money making decisions, but I do a lot.
Right. That's why I feel like behavioral finance is something that you don't think about until you think about it, until you know that it's there, and then you can always pick up on it. Any other questions? All right.
Okay, so now we're going to shift gears a little bit and do some like slightly more interactive things that I still think play a huge role in behavioral finance. So we've talked a lot about all of these emotions that you have that are playing into these decisions. And now I want to like take a look at some of these emotions at like a core value level. So we're going to be talking about like values and helping you to determine what is important to you so you can use those values in some of your financial decisions to make them a little bit better, and to maybe not fall into some of these biases so often. Because I feel like if you can keep your core values kind of at the forefront of your mind, it's a little bit easier for you to pay attention and succeed at some of your financial goals and not fall into some of these traps that we've talked about. So I thought, or to like, just to, you know, define values in case people are confused about what they are. Values are the fundamental beliefs that you have as a person. So like at your very core, what is truly important to you? So I put a little link on the screen and then I'm going to paste the link into the chat as well. So I thought it'd be fun for us to, you know, spend a few minutes, maybe like 2 or 3, either working through this value exercise and trying to see like some of the values that are important to you, or just if you don't have time to do that or you don't want to, just take a second and think, hey, like what are some core values that I might have? And I also provided like a little example of a couple if you can't think of any, but take a second, think about what's important to you, and then maybe drop some in the chat, or we'll give it a minute and then maybe come off mute and share what some of those values that you might have are. I never know when like enough time is like gone by. So anybody give me a thumbs up when they're ready to share. Okay. I guess I'll share one of my values first, and I'll even talk about how I see this value playing out in my everyday life. And then hopefully some of you will want to share as well. So one of the values that I put as like an example of top 5 that also happens to be a core value for me is family. So I think that when I'm thinking about different financial decisions, I'm always trying to buy things for my family, or always thinking, hey, like, how can I use my money to visit my family? Or like when it comes time for the holidays or birthdays, I'm like, okay, let me start thinking about like what kind of gifts I'm gonna get from my family to show that I care about them and show that I'm like thinking about them at this time of year. Those are just like kind of like a couple examples of how I see my family value playing out. But because I know that family is a priority to me, I'm always going to budget some of my financial goals to make sure I have that space in my budget for travel to visit my family or maybe to shop for them, those types of things. There is a direct correlation I find with values and your cash flow, like finding space in your cash flow for those times. What did Carolyn say? Yeah, no, I think that that's a really good point, Carolyn, that like your values do really, really change over time. Right. So if you did this activity today, you might have one set of values. If you do them again a couple weeks later, a couple years later, your values have really shifted. So it's important to kind of regularly check in with these things and see how your perspective shifts and how maybe some of your habits might have shifted as well, in order to keep up with the change in values. Ryan, do you want to share one of your values and maybe how you see it at work?
Yeah. I think usually the values that I go for are my health is a big one to me. I value my creativity a lot. And another one that I usually throw in there is my music equipment. That's not more of a more of a tangible thing, the tangible value rather than just like the concept like family or creativity. But being a musician, I have all my expensive music equipment around me that I really value as part of me, part of what defines me.
And that directly plays into you being creative, though. Like music is a form of creative expression for you, and you're willing to spend money on really, really nice musical equipment.
Right.
As I'm checking out the chat, I'm seeing flexibility and friendship. Yeah, you'll spend money to go visit your friends and to make that connection. That is so true. So like those friendship connections are so important to so many of us, and we are willing to do so much for our friends financially, emotionally, socially. Like a lot of times we're really willing to go the distance for them. And I think that that's really important to be able to remember and keep in mind and see how that does affect your finances, right? Because if you're willing to spend money going to visit those friends, that costs money, and maybe you budget for that, or plan your cash flow around some of those trips. Absolutely. Anybody else have anything that they would like to share about their values and how they see them playing into their lives? Education is really, really valuable to me as well. That's why I'm here at VCU. That's why I'm willing to spend the money on college and the student loans and all of those types of things, because education is of such high value to me. I'm willing to put in the work, the time, the energy, the money to get my degree. It's a really good example of one.
Self-care is a top value for me. And so I used to, it wasn't important. Like I'll go a long time without like massages and things, some things that people consider amenities or expensive, but you have to invest in yourself. You only get one body. So it's like investing in those things, whether it's your hair, clothes, like I said, massage or a trip, if you need that for self-care, or a book may help you to wind down and have self-care. So I really added that to an investment, or even like in a pedicure, manicure, like on a monthly basis. Like that's priority now, and it's a core value to take care of me. Sometimes we forget about ourselves as we're taking care of families and friends and stuff like that. We can forget about ourselves, so we should prioritize ourselves.
Oh yeah, I think that that's a really good, really, really good point, right? Self-care is a really big thing, right? We need to, or if that's something that you really value, you do need to build that space into your budget, because if you're caring for yourself, then you are way more equipped to care for other people. You come first a lot of the time, or you need to prioritize yourself too. So that's a really good example. Does anybody else have anything else they want to share? Okay, if not, we will move on.
All right, we're going to get into some money habitudes now. So, habitude is, of course, a conjunction of the word habit and attitude. And here at the Money Spot, we love money habitudes because it's a way to define yourself and how you use your money, how money defines you. Um, we usually use it when we first meet students to help us get a better understanding of how they are with their money and their financial habits. So yeah, habitudes, these are things that influence our behaviors and decisions. And usually we go through a little, like, I don't want to say test, but you ask a bunch of questions and you can answer, oh, okay, yeah, that's me, I do that, or I don't do that, which will help categorize you into one of these 6 habitudes. So I think we're going to do a poll real fast for those. See if you guys can have, just by looking at them, I'll give a definition for them. See if you guys have an idea of what you are. So we'll start with security. So security is money helps you feel safe and secure. We have planning. Money helps you achieve your goals. Status, money helps you create a positive image. Spontaneous, money helps you enjoy the moment. Giving, money helps you feel good by giving it to others. And carefree, money is not a priority to you. So you can think about how these might play into your financial habits. If it just sounds like who you are. I thought it was interesting the first time I took, there's a little card game that we play where you gather a bunch of cards up and that define you. And for each card you have of a certain color, that counts as a point towards a certain habitude. And once you have X amount of points towards a habitude, that's your habitude. And I thought it was interesting, by just doing this simple little game, it really defined me so accurately that I was kind of surprised by that.
Okay, I think we have some very interesting results. So if you haven't voted, I'll give you like 5 more seconds and then I'll close the poll and we'll see what we have, because these are super interesting. Okay, closing out the poll, and I'll share the results with you guys. So overwhelmingly, you guys are all security, which is super interesting.
How do you guys feel like security defines your money habits? Like, is there a certain thing that made you immediately think like, oh yeah, definitely security is what defines me?
I think because money is just a big part of, you got to pay your mortgage with it. You have to, like, all your necessities in life comes from money, and it determines what kind of food you eat. It determines where you live at. It determines what kind of car you drive, like all of that. It drives so much in our lives. And so when you feel like you have enough of it, you feel safe and secure, like you can be successful and productive. But if you don't have enough, then that's when anxiety and fear and insecurity comes in.
I agree with Danielle, because pretty much everything that is material is going to cost us something. And if we don't have enough money to pay the rent or to put gas in the car or other things, we tend to get really anxious and wary. So we don't feel secure when we're feeling that way.
Right. And that makes a lot of sense. I think the one that I got was, I think security was up there. The 3 I had was like security, I think it was status and planning, which definitely defines me. A couple of things in chat. Security, maybe it's because of the change and uncertainty around us. With all the recent current events, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And I can see that, but probably, the past couple of years have likely changed how people see their money. Past events also help shape who you are, right? Okay. I can see that.
And I'll say for me, I'm like a combination of security and planning, which makes for kind of a messy combination. I think a really nice combination, but it's a little bit messy. I find it's very, very hard for me to spend money on things because I'm so focused on making sure I'm safe and secure. I tend to only see like certain purchases as like of value. So there's like a lot of things that I won't buy. Like maybe I'm not as good at like buying self-care type of things. But I also find that when I am going to spend money or splurge money on some of those like self-care type of things, I do a lot of research and planning. Like I'm one of those people who compares websites or has up what are the like little extensions on my web browser for like what's the best deal that I can get. I love a deal. I never like to buy things for full price. So it's like a really interesting combination. But I do see it at work every single day in my life. And I think that me learning about my habitudes, I like read them and I was like, oh yeah, like for sure, this is me. I see this. It's 100% true, which is not the same for everybody. We definitely have seen people where they're like, yeah, this might have been what I got, but this isn't me. So, yeah. Anything else, Ryan?
Does anyone else have any other comments, questions about different habitudes? Any other thoughts?
Oh, I wanted to ask you guys, like, do you feel like any of these habitudes in your minds have like a negative connotation? Or some of them where you're like, oh, I wish I am like never that one. Because sometimes I feel like people have like a pretty visceral reaction to some. And other ones are like, okay, I see this. I wanted to see if like any of you guys picked up on that. Okay, I'm seeing the answer I expected. Status, carefree. Okay. Yeah. I think that if you're into security, carefree is like the last possible thing that you could think of. So I could see that. Like if you guys are mainly security folks, yeah, the carefree thing is a little hard. It's hard to envision. Also the spontaneous one, especially if you're really into planning or security, I could see how that you have a really hard time with that. And then status is the one that I find that most people are like, oh, like there's no way. I definitely don't want to be status. But if you think about the definition that Ryan was sharing about it helping you create a positive image, like don't think about status as like the traditional means of status. Like status can be a good thing too, is like the point. And status can really, like the people whose habitude that is, I think they try to use it really effectively, and they try to use it to help them and influence positive financial decisions. More to say on that? I just wanted to see if you guys picked like what you guys picked up on. Okay, are we good? On to our last slide then.
So I want to thank everybody for joining today. We'll stick around for a few more questions if you have additional questions about behavioral finance for Dorian, Ryan, but wanted to thank you both for presenting to us about the psychology of money and to help us maybe understand why we make some of the decisions that we do, what matters to us, and how those might align or be misaligned, so we can be a little bit more conscious with the decisions that we're making related to our spending and our saving. We do have a couple upcoming events. We are going to be tabling in the Commons on April 19th, and you can stop by and visit the Money Spot and do the Money Habitudes activity with us. We will have some prizes as well. Our next presentation is going to be April 26th at noon, and you will see some familiar faces there. It will be myself and Ryan will be discussing eating on a budget. The registration link is going to go into the chat, or you can visit the Financial Success Center's website for additional details, which is up here on the screen as well. I'm going to put into the chat too just a quick little feedback form so that you can share your thoughts about today's presentation. Tell us how much you love Dorian and Ryan, of course. But again, thank you, Dorian. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And we will stick around if there are any additional questions. But thank you all so much, and enjoy the nice, wonderful Richmond weather outside.